Childhood memories.
Shortly after my birth, my father took to constantly travelling about. He would now and then come back home all of a sudden, and with him came foreign servants, with whom I felt extremely eager to make friends. Once there came a young Punjabi servant named Lenu. The cordiality he got from us would have been worthy of Ranjit Singh himself. Not only was he a foreigner, but a Punjabi to boot. What wonder he stole our hearts away. We had the same reverence for the whole Punjabi nation as for Bhim and Arjun of the Mahabharata. They were warriors, and if they sometimes lost, that was clearly the enemy's fault. Caged in the house as we were, anything savouring of foreign parts had a peculiar charm for us. This was also the reason why Gabriel, the Jew, with his embroidered gabardine, who came to sell attar and scented oils, stirred me so, and the huge Karbalis, with their dusty, baggy trousers and knapsacks and bundles, wrought on my imagination a fearful fascination. One day I was summoned upstairs to my father. How would I like to go with him to the Himalayas? I was asked. Away from the school and off to the Himalayas. Would I like it? Oh, that I could have rent the skies with a shout. That might have given an idea of the how. Our first halt was to be a few days at Bolpur. My cousin Satya had told us that getting into a railway carriage was a dangerous affair. The least slip and it was all up. Then one had to hold on to his seat with all his might. Otherwise, the jolt was so tremendous that one could get thrown off. Therefore, when we got to the station, I was all a-quiver. So easily did we get into a compartment that I felt the worst was yet to come. When we made an absurdly smooth start without any semblance of adventure, I felt woefully disappointed. The train sped on. The broad fields with their blue-green border trees and the villages nestling in their shade flew past in a stream of pictures which melted away like a flood of mirages. It was evening when we reached Bolpur. As I got into the palanquin, I closed my eyes to preserve the whole of the wonderful vision before my waking eyes in the morning light. Though I was a mere child, my father did not place any restriction on my wandering. In the hollows of the sandy soil, the rainwater had ploughed deep furrows, carving out miniature mountain ranges full of red gravel and pebbles of various shapes, through which ran tiny streams, revealing the geography of Lilliput. From this region I would gather many curious pieces of stone and take the collection to my father. He never made light of my labours. On the contrary, he waxed enthusiastic. "How wonderful!" he exclaimed. "Wherever did you get all these?" "There are many more. Thousands and thousands," I burst out. "I could bring as many every day." "That would be nice," he replied. "Why not decorate my little hill with them?" An attempt had been made to dig a tank in the garden, but the subsoil water proving too low, it had been abandoned with the excavated earth piled up into a hillock. On top of this height, my father used to sit for his morning prayer, and as he sat, the sun would rise at the edge of the undulating expanse which stretched away in front of him. This was the hill he asked me to decorate. In one of the ravines I came upon a spring water pool which overflowed as a little rivulet. Here I saw tiny fish battling their way up the current. "I found a lovely spring," I told my father. "Couldn't we get our bathing and drinking water from there?" "The very thing," he agreed. sharing my rapture, and gave orders for our water supply to be drawn from that spring. We left Bolpur and making short halts at Allahabad and Kanpur, now Kanpur, we stopped at last at Amritsar. The golden temple of Amritsar comes back to me as a dream. Many a morning I accompanied my father to this Guru Darbar of the Sikhs in the middle of a lake. There the sacred chanting resounds continually. My father, seated amidst the throng of worshippers, would sometimes add his voice to the hymn of praise, joining in their devotions. The worshippers would wax enthusiastically cordial, and we would return loaded with the sanctified offerings of sugar crystals and sweets. We stayed about a month in Amritsar, and towards the middle of April started for the Dalhousie Hills, the terraced hills, as we went up in a jumpan, were all aflame with the beauty of the flowering spring crops. My eyes had no rest the livelong day. So great was my fear lest anything should escape them. Wherever at the turn of the road into a gorge, the great forest trees were found clustering closer, and from under their shade a little waterfall trickled out, babbling its way over the black moss-covered rocks. There the jumpan bearers would put down their burden and take a rest. The house we had taken at Bakrota was on the highest hilltop. My father was not at all nervous about letting me wander about freely even here. Some way below our house there stretched a spur thickly wooded with deodars. Into this wilderness I would venture alone with my iron-spiked staff. These lordly forest trees, with their huge shadows, towering like so many giants, what immense lives they had lived through the centuries. And yet this boy of only the other day was crawling about their trunks unchallenged. Staff in hand, I would wander away from one peak to another, but my father did not object. To the end of his life, I have observed, he never stood in the way of our independence.